And then I would look, can I have a sponsor to find my new streaming video and tell me that it's working? And I'll do that as well, so that we're all in this suffering together. Oh, hi, welcome back. I have to get used to giving an introduction. These are so painful to watch. I'm live, yeah? Hi, okay, this is Wednesday, the 22nd of January, 2020. We are working on lab material now. I'm going to talk through some of the questions and concerns you all have to do with labs and really make sure that I've addressed your questions in full. The sooner I shut up, the better. However, at this point, my priority is not to shut up. My priority is to give you really clear instructions on how to submit your labs and the type of work that I expect when you do that. The first, should we start with questions, or do you want me to start with a little bit of content that I think is relevant to you? What would you prefer, Adam? Content? Okay, that's cool. So on this site, there is this document. I am really hoping for a day where I can do this type of thing for every class that I teach. Let me say this. There are two things that won't happen to me this quarter. You know them. I won't die, and I won't get divorced. I don't control the first one. The second one I have a lot more control over, but within the most that I can, I'm going to not die and not get divorced. With that said, I'm going to impose due dates and schedules so that I accomplish those goals. However, I'm flexible. When I was a young teacher, I said to one of my classes, you can submit anything at any time in the quarter. Do you know what happened on the last day? This is not a joke. I tell this story often. I had a stack of paper that if I put my fist on the table, went above my elbow. Some teachers would get mad at their students. I got mad at myself. I realized that I had given them a long leash, and they took it, and they did not realize, they did not think, what am I about to do to Jeff and his mental state when I wait till the last day? They thought, I don't have to submit to the last day, let me wait because I have other stuff in my life, right? I cannot grade all of your work on different days and track that. Can you guess why? There's one of me and 25 of you. Thus, I ask for you to do the absolute best that you can to stick to my grading criteria. However, if you cannot submit stuff on time, don't trip. I will accept late work. That has to be a negotiated contract where you stare into my eyes, look into my soul, tell me what's on your mind, and I have to say, yes, I will accept that. So if you do not talk with me prior to setting a different due date, I expect it to be done on the day that I am asking for it. If you submit work that is subpar, meaning that if you submit work that is not passing, I will give it back to you and I expect you to resubmit it. Some teachers will fail you, right? That's not me. Do you know what happens when I fail a student and then don't regrade it? Do you know what happens to that student's likeliness of going back and learning that material? Let me ask you. If you're a teacher, you take a test, you get an F on the test, teacher doesn't give you corrections, etc. What do you do with that piece of paper? Yeah, I mean, I just had people go like this, right? Because there's no incentive. But the moment you rip it up, what happens to all the mistakes you made? They disappear. Mistakes grow our brain. The point of making mistakes is that you can go back and correct them. If you submit work that is below the level of passing, I fully expect that you, one, go back and correct your errors. 2, resubmit your work and do so on a time frame that works for me. So with that said, I challenge each of you to stick to the time frame that I have. Do the best that you can. If you don't recognize that you're making me a delinquent father and an absentee husband, and I want you to feel that pressure and feel really guilty about it. It's funny. Why would I want you to feel guilty about that? What am I really praying for all of you? To learn, for sure, but to do it so that you're not getting backed up in the quarter, right? So that you're not waiting to week 8 to do stuff that we should have finished in week 4. And so use the guilt that I'm putting onto you like a good mother, right? So that you can stay on track. However, if stuff comes up for you, don't trip. Come talk with me individually. We can reorganize it. If you produce work that's not up to passing, I'm going to give it back to you, and then we're going to re-talk about that. I define learning in my class, and this is important for your labs here. Learning is a process that leads to change, which occurs as a result of your experiences. There are 3 components of this. When I grade, I am trying to capture this information. In this class, this is the only class that I'm doing this, I no longer use points. I cannot wait. Ben posed this question in my Math 2B class last quarter, right? Every lab that you turn in to me, I grade on 4 categories. And those categories, so let's go ahead and figure out what the categories are. Could you guess what category 1 is? Program specification and correctness. And then there are 5 subcategories of category 1. I see clear evidence that you read the assessment prompt carefully and fully. I had a number of students in their first lab not read my words and got non-passing grades for that. Because they literally just didn't read it and they submitted what they thought I wanted, right? I mean, I don't want to say that I felt disrespected, but I will say that when I checked what grade they earned there, they definitely did not pass, right? What's the next one? Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is that you have access to this at any time that you want to go, right? I never actually feel disrespected when a student is struggling, to be honest with you. I feel like I want to help you. I believe you all are geniuses. I also believe you have a lot on your mind. This is a hard class. Some of you might not realize how important this class is, and you might do this very human thing where you deal with bigger problems, right? So don't trip. As soon as you're ready, come talk with me and we'll find out how we can help you. I'm going to do everything that I can so every one of you succeeds in this class this quarter. And my hope is to make this a really fun, positive, and uplifting experience. I won't die and I won't get divorced. But aside from that, I want to have fun with you. When you give me your code, I expect to be able to run it. So every lab that you submit, I'm going to be asking for physical copies of your work as well as an electronic copy. Could you guess what I'm going to try to do with the electronic copies of your work? Every piece of code that you give me, can you guess what I'm going to try to do? I'm going to open it and run it and then look at your output, right? So if I have to spend any time running your code, like if there's bugs in it that break MATLAB, great. But that's definitely not A-level work, right? I mean, it could be actually. If the bug is that, like, it depends on what the bug is, right? But if it takes me like 15 minutes to find the bug, like, I'm going to start twitching a little bit. Yeah, I'm definitely just going to give it back to you and say, you find the bug, and then when you found it, tell me and resubmit it, right? So at the end of the day, like, I'm going to look at this entire set, and I'm going to give you a category grade. I can't tell you how I do that because I don't. It's not based on a formula. Could you guess if all of them were A's, what I might give you? What you might earn? An A. If all of them were N's or Y's, Y means not yet, right? If you submit work that is below passing level, I don't even give it a failing grade. I just give it a not yet. because you haven't finished it yet. So I'm going to give it back to you, and then do you know what you need to do soon? Finish it. Give it back to me, and when you're ready. And you have to negotiate. At that point, if you get a not yet, you have to come negotiate with me when I'm going to give it back to you, right? Because I don't want to get divorced, right? So those are things that I have to hold in. But as the quarter goes on, if you have questions about how this works, you can come ask me. So that's category 1. What's category 2? Yep. And then if you wanted to know what you needed to do, what's the first thing I expect when you submit something? Staple lab prompt on the front of the paper copy of your lab report. And then some students ask, why are you so specific about what you expect from us? Have you ever submitted an assignment and you forgot something that the teacher clearly asked you to do? I've done this multiple times. So when you submit your lab prompt as the first document and I grade your work and you forget something, do you know what I'm going to grab? A highlighter and a Post-it note, and I'm going to highlight the exact item that you forgot and put a Post-it note right there to show you the thing that you're missing was written right at that moment. So that's one thing that I like to do. That's why I asked you to submit the lab prompt. The second thing that I like to say is if you do good work in this class, I hope 5 years from now, if you code in MATLAB, you can look back at your own work. Have you ever done an assignment in a quarter, not looked at it again till 4 quarters later, and then not even understood a single thing in the assignment 4 quarters later? You know what happens when you staple a lab prompt that specifies exactly what I expect to the front of the actual submission, and you look at that 5 quarters in advance? You have an exact outline of what problems you were answering as the top document in the thing that you're looking at, right? So those are the 2 reasons why I asked you to submit your lab prompts to me. And then, of course, I want to have your name on it. I want your class number on it. Put all components of the hard copy of lab report. And I'll specify this today, for example. I'll tell you exactly what I expect in the hard copy of your lab report. But this is, in general, the entire quarter, right? And then you're going to submit the hard copy of your lab report before the stated deadline. I am okay with the idea that if we renegotiate your deadline, you can still pass. I don't know that you can earn an A+. I don't know. I'm open. Maybe you can. I don't know. We can negotiate. So for most of you that are going to be able to stay on time, if you meet the deadline, awesome. If you don't, but we renegotiate the deadline, I'm still going to count that. At that point, we can negotiate what that means in terms of your grade. Assignment requirements and delivery. I will be giving you a Dropbox link. So I pay for Dropbox. I'll give you a link where you can upload a PDF copy, electronic copy of all of your labs. I think we did that as zip files, right? Yeah, so last quarter, every time you submit a lab, you're going to submit 2 things. You're going to submit a hard copy that I take with me to grade, and then a corresponding soft copy. Instead of submitting multiple different files, you'll submit one zip file that I can then unzip on my computer and open, and all the files that I need are on there, right? We'll talk through that as the day goes on. This is a lot, right? Any questions before we continue? Okay, so let's think about the 4 categories. Problem 1, what was the first category? And what are the different things I'm looking for here? Yep. And I actually track every grade that you get. I track it in my records, right? Next one is assignment requirements for hard copy. Next one is assignment requirements for soft copy. Oh, I guess there's 6 categories. Documentation. Could you guess what I mean by documentation? I mean, every MATLAB script file that you've submitted for this lab starts with a header. The header comments include descriptive information, help, documentation, author, and version information. Have you seen an example of code that was written with this? That's awesome. I almost was setting myself up. have you read a article and got access to a different article that gives you specific guidelines on how to write headers? Some people asked, how will you know if I've read it? So now I pose that question right back to you. How will I know if you've read the articles about commenting your code and a header section in your work? I can look at the script file that you submit and check for myself, is this thing headed? Does it have the type of information that I asked for, right? Okay. Write clear and extensive comments. For now, because I want to break a what I call egotistical habit, let me say that it will be hard to over-comment. Some of you are, all of you are amazing people. Every single one of you is going to change the world, hopefully with MATLAB, and hopefully you get paid well to do it. As we learn, some of you I'm going to ask you to write less comments because I don't want you to suffer. But for now, when in doubt, comment. And then we'll learn styles as the quarter goes on, right? The last thing is readability and presentation. Again, I expect you to read all of this stuff. The most important one in terms of what you might call like technical science capacity, the ability to, could you guess if I hired you to write code what I expect when I give you that paycheck? That the code works, right? So from the standpoint of like, what you might call the technical meeting technical specification, this first one is what I care about. When I run the code, your code accurately produces all outputs. But that's not the only one that I grade on. And sometimes it takes multiple iterations to get to that level of proficiency. So between now and next week, you're going to prep a hard copy that you're going to submit to me. Charlotte, you had this beautiful question about binders and submissions. Could you repeat that question for the whole class so that they hear it?
So Jeff and I were talking about all the documents that you've read and indicating that, and we were talking about, wow, well, over the course of like the first few weeks, we're going to be reading a lot of documents, and so like he doesn't want to carry binders, and I don't want to carry binders. So we were just talking about how to do it, or how to prove that we've done it digitally, but also like how important it is to do it in the first place. Because we might, past like week 6, we'll start doing stuff where we don't necessarily have documentation to help us, so we need to be able to understand that we can look back at the documents and be able to guide us.
So let me say this. I was thinking last week that I'd do binders, and then over the weekend I was like, how am I going to carry 25 binders home? And then I realized that I am either going to carry a forklift with me, or I can't do that. But let me show you, one of the things that I try to do every lab that you do is actually read what I expect you to read. I don't recreate the examples and the problems that I asked you to solve because I've already done those multiple times. I don't need to redo those, right? But this was an example. When I was writing this laboratory and doing this, every document that I asked you all to read, so the first thing I did is I printed out this entire thing. I put it in a little sleeve because I am fastidious. One of my students is teaching me not to call myself compulsive, but instead fastidious. I like that. Kind of exciting. So every document that I asked you to read, I too found those documents, saved them on my computer, highlighted those, and then put them in numerical order, and then I actually read every single one of these again, even though I've already read them like 5 times, right? So that at any time during the quarter, if there was any confusion about that thing, I could go this. Josh, you had this beautiful comment last week about physically printing out documents. Do you want to share that with the class?
Oh, yeah. I was asking Jeff if you would accept just like you can make a screenshot of a folder for digital documents.
Yes, for sure.
Rather than binder full paper.
Yep.
Yeah.
Screenshot of digital documents. To be honest with you, if you didn't even print these out, if you just told me you read them, I'd accept that. Like, I'm going to be grading you on the contents of those documents. When I look at your work, I'll be able to tell if you read the document and figured it out, right? So from the standpoint of submitting proof that you read stuff, it's not, right now I'm not in a position that I'm going to grade that heavily, though some of you take yourself really seriously as students, and if you want to submit, like, hey, I've created this, I'll certainly give you feedback on that, right? That was a beautiful statement, right? Personally, I have systems where I like physical pieces of paper. Wonderful. So from that standpoint, the next question that Nick asked, do you want to repeat that question? That was a really beautiful question. Okay, so these were some things that when I graded last quarter, I created a cheat sheet of all the things that I learned from grading. So in this case, I'm going to ask everybody to submit a .m text script file. When adding contextual comments to variable declarations, I need to show you a positive example and a negative example. We'll do that as soon as I get the graded stuff in. Please reread documents for headers. We'll talk more about this. Here are some of the derivations from last quarter. So this is a student, I don't remember who number 70 was, winter of last year. But this is this person's derivation. So she writes up the entire, should we call this a she? I can read it, so. That was mean, Jeff. Yeah, I write like a she too. My sheros, I have a lot of sheros.
It's not necessary for us to copy what you wrote.
Not necessarily, but I always like to think to yourself, how long does it really take to copy the problem over? If you read this in 5 years and you've copied the problem on your solutions, how likely it is that you're going to forget what you did. So, and then they actually go through, so these are some of the examples of the derivations. We'll see some code in a second, so you can take a look at that. It sucks that this is online now, because then you can just copy the let me be careful about this. Is another example. Right? I mean, you can take a look up here. I don't want to show you all this stuff. Here's some great code. This code was decent anyways. So full documentation, right? I mean, this code actually solves your problem, so that sucks.
Oh, they derive it in code.
They didn't derive it in code. They just wrote code that solves the problem. And now it's available to you on MATLAB, on YouTube, so that sucks. But it's your first time around, right? And if you're serious about learning this, this is a useful tool, right? Yeah. There's another example. You can take a look at these. These are some examples of how to do it. The thing that I've never collected from anybody is problem 1. Right? So Art had this beautiful question. I think you've already repeated this out loud. I kind of forget at this moment. Do I have to do it using Post-it notes? What was the answer to that question?
You have a way of doing it electronically or something.
I have a Post-it note. You wanted to use digital?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, so what I want to see is that you have as accurate a map as possible of the next 4 to 6 years of your life, where you've mapped out all your classes, that you've done some research, started to ask questions about how you might use MATLAB in the past. My preference is to do that via paper and pencil, but that's my preference. Whatever you all feel is most appropriate for you, please do. I would guess that we would have solutions to problem 1, and then also I think problem, what was the other one that I'm asking you to physically do stuff? Oh, but I mean like produce work that is beyond reading. Oh yeah, cheat sheets. Yeah, so I guess each one has a cheat sheet, right? Yeah, so I guess problem 1, in that order, right? Top sheet of the hard copy would be the lab prompt, solutions to problem 1. Let me ask you this. When are you going to look back at your own problem 1 to actually use it? I mean, I don't know if you're going to use it, but yeah, so anybody ever look at a calendar and not realize why you made the decision that you made? Like your scheduling decisions, like you forgot the reasoning that you did? Have you noticed, how many of you have started problem 1 at least? Have you noticed when you started it, you've done research that gives you concrete answers to why you're scheduling classes in certain quarters or semesters? Would you include that documentation in the write-up? Do you think that's for me? Who's that for? So here's the challenge for you. Create a schedule for the next 3 to N years of your life. Every decision that you make, have a clearly documented source of why you made that decision attached to that calendar that you could find within an instant in any academic counseling appointment. So that's problem 1. Problem 2 is a cheat sheet. Problem 3 is a cheat sheet, in that order, right? And then 4, you'd have your derivation on top, and then a printout of the code on the bottom, all in that order, right? Maybe we say that you save a PDF copy of all of that in your Lab 2 directory that you will zip. And then in addition to the PDF copy of the code, maybe you also save your .m script file so that I can open that .m script file, run it, and see that it actually produces the proper results.
So you want a PDF of, like, if our derivation is written, you want a PDF of it as well?
What do you think? Redundant? Okay. I mean, my feeling is that if I have a PDF on it and I lost the actual derivation, then I would always have it online. And 10 years from now, let's say that I had this on Dropbox, but my house burned down. That's an idea. But the fact of the matter is, whose class is this? It's your class, right? So if you argue with me, and especially I know in your case, like, I think you have systems. Some of my systems come from a 35-year-old man who's losing his hair, not a 22-year-old man who has full hair, right? Or a woman. Yeah. So some of the stuff that I do solves problems that might not be on your mind, right? Like having your house burned down, for example, or being able to access your solutions anywhere on the globe just from internet access, right? Yeah. Any other questions for me? Yeah, Kenny.
What's the files? Could we hard-coded the problems for the problem here? Could we do like a user?
Play. I had one guy who queried me, so I would run his code and it would ask me to input. Make it painless. Don't make me input 45 things, right? Like, don't ask me my mother's name and my social security number and etc. But you could do either. You could either have query the user, or you could hard code it in and let me choose it that way. Anything else? Can I stop recording? The last thing that I would say is, how many of you have at least one person contact information from somebody in this class? Here's a better question. How many of you have nobody's contact information from somebody in this class? All right. I'm going to take a very non-standard approach to this. You can work together on these problems. Let me tell you what working together is not. I really trust Nick as a student. I'm a busy man. Hey, Nick, can you send me your code? And then Control C, Control V, delete, 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 name, Jeff Anderson, submit. If you do that, and I notice it, that is a non-passing, and then we'll have a conversation. So that is not working together. However, this is working together. Hey, Nick, can you talk me through what you did to solve this problem? And then he literally talks me through it. I can look at your code while we're doing that, etc. What's not going to happen, though, is as he's talking me through it, I'm not going to copy verbatim his code, right? That happened a few times last quarter. I had some really kind of advanced coders that would talk other coders through the entire code, and those other coders would actually copy the code while they were doing it. One of the really fun things about sharing code together is not, let me just copy your line syntax by syntax. It's, hey, this is how I solve this problem. Keep MATLAB shut during that time. Have the other person go work on it by themselves, come back and compare, right? I think that when you work on problems together, your brain grows. If you don't have somebody's contact information, this would be a good day to get it. You might not share cell phone numbers. You could share, what is it? The Facebook? See, I made you laugh. Yeah, all right. The Snapchat, the Instagram, I'd say screw all those companies. But that's one way to get in contact with each other. Email's another way, right? for sure, I would set the goal that every one of you has at least one person that you can contact over the next week when you get stuck. I'm going to shut up about this and let you work for the rest of today. If you have more specific questions, please come chat. You're doing great work. I cannot wait to see the stuff that you